Hello everyone and welcome to Module 2. This is Dave Weaver from Resource Practices Branch with the Ministry of Lands, Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations in Victoria. Got to get that one right. Yeah, so welcome. This is the Module 2 of retention training, and this specific module is retention silviculture survey techniques and methodologies. And so we'll be going over sort of the extension part of the surveys manual and complex survey methodologies. And this is a studio recording, not a live recording of a presentation. So hopefully it's a little bit clearer and more contained than a live recording. We won't have the exchanges on the outside. Adjust your volume appropriately. We've kind of tested this microphone studio-wise and should be clear enough for initial recording. And so just adjust your volume up and down, and if you've got some issues with hearing me, it should be set just about right. So I want to thank my producer, Tim Abada, for generating the program that we have here for this recording and supporting me on getting this into YouTube, I hope, eventually. So, okay, so I'm going to run through about 39 slides on this presentation, and it'll take about an hour and a half, is about the sort of the rehearsal length we went for this recording. Okay, and as you can see, we're going to kind of go through retention methodologies, and again, this whole session is somewhat targeted for experienced silviculture surveyors who already know the basics in surveying and surveying in straightforward even age stands with minimal retention, but this training is for retention for greater than 5 square meters in the overstory. That's where we're going to be heading. If I can advance the slide. There we go. Well, so Module 2, our agenda for today is going to go over these 4 aspects of complex surveys. The audience we're targeting, again, as I just mentioned, was experienced silviculture surveyors. We're going to go through all of the complex surveys within the manual, from multi-story to layered to deviation from potential, and the coastal version of deviation from potential, which would be single entry dispersed retention. As you can see on the slides that are presented, the slide that's up there right now, it shows the chapters of the manual if you want to refer to that afterwards, the surveys manual. The existing one that's on the website for 2014, and then the 2015 one, April 1st, 2015, will have the same chapter numbers as well. So we're going to go over different stand type applications, limitations, techniques, procedures that would be appropriate for those different survey methodologies, and then do a virtual 3.99 radius plot, because we're virtual here. We're not real. We're actually on computer time. So and it's kind of a developing as you go kind of plot. We sort of work through the plot and add different dimensions and go that way. So let's launch into it and see how we make out. There we go. So this is the scenario we're given. You end up in a block like this that's got some form of retention in the overstory, usually greater than 5 square meters of layer 1s in the overstory. And how do I survey? How do you survey this kind of block? How do you approach this kind of block? What do we do in order to capture all of the structure that's there and capture specifically the structure that's going to be contributing towards the obligation? And that's the key about this surveying technique. How do we capture this individual that's in the overstory? Is it contributing? Is it not? Wow. Kind of why is it there? What's its condition? What's its forest health attributes? How about the regen that's underneath? Is there some criteria for that? Is there a distance? What's the minimum intertree distance given for the standard that you're measuring to? What methodology? What's the regime? How do we approach it? How about that group of individuals in the background that were they left for a reason, or do they contribute to stocking? Have they been typed out? Are those look like layer twos or so? Will they actually be contributing to the stocking in some form or not? These are all questions that have to come up. And as I mentioned, the first step, even aged or uneven aged, really that's a key threshold that one has to pass as soon as you get to that point. Multi-story, layered, deviation from potential. So these are some of the questions we're going to ask today. I'll just give you a bit of a teaser here as to where we're going and the complexities we're going to be dealing with, and stand structures and variabilities in those realms. So let's just open with a couple of different concepts here. Hopefully you can't hear my papers flipping around. But so this is out of the survey manual, beginning of chapter 9 in the manual, actually. And again, it's just a little bit of a matrix to give you a context as to how we would decide what survey methodology to use. And if you were with us in Module 1, we come back to the same separation in the columns between even-aged and uneven-aged structure. And then the rows are separated by stocking standard. What is our existing stocking standard, which is the first step in any survey is, well, I guess the first step would be the management regime, and then what is the stocking standard? What is your targets and minimums? What are the preferred and acceptable species, minimum intertree distance, the whole suite of attributes that make up a stocking standard. What's the silviculture system? What is the intention of leaving these residual stems behind? And then the resultant survey methodology options that you may have. And the caveat here is that some of the basal areas, again, are guidelines. They're not carved in stone. This 5 square meters is a fairly good line to define, because that's really where the line is that you have to report the overstory retention into results. And that's what we covered in Module 1, was about reporting that retention and what form and manner it's required to be into results. So that 5 square meters is a fairly solid line, but some of these other ones are more of guidelines in that context. So within this training module, we're going to be looking at what's highlighted here in red primarily. And so it's the ones that are greater than 5 square meters, and dabbling in the even age side and the uneven age side. And we're only dabbling in the single tree selection uneven age side, but in the even age side we're going to look at layered survey procedures and deviation from potential. And the coastal version of CEDRIS is the acronym, single entry dispersed retention stocking standard. There's a drink of water here. And as you notice, the multi-story survey methodology on the right-hand side, really recommended within the stocking standard guidelines for the province for interior Douglas fir zone primarily, and only exception would be in small area based tenures such as woodlots. And I know that's some woodlots outside of the IDF and ICH and CWH on the coast have been trying those multi-story approaches with multiple entries, and have had mixed success, but it's been really sets up well for those smaller area-based tenures that you can build in multiple access structures, basically. Okay, so again, just a few definitions of layers, because it's very important that everyone get familiar with these layers in a working nature. These are carved in stone within results, and this is how we report into results. And so it makes sense to tally your achievement of silviculture obligations, regen, or free growing by those layers. So just looking at Well, briefly, I'll just spend a couple of minutes here going over the different layers. So we have layer 1, mature, layer 2, pole, layer 3, sapling, and layer 4, regen. And again, it's almost counterintuitive. One would think that the regen layer should be layer 1, but it comes from the top down, as we all know how it works, especially those in government. So layer 1 is equal to or greater than 12.5 dBH at breast height, and then the next layer 2, is 7.5 to 12.49 centimeters dBH. Sapling is greater than breast height, which this line shows here. We've got height on this scale. Greater than breast height for layer 3, the sapling, and up to 7.49, so just under 7.5, and of course regen is breast height and below. So that's the regen layer. That's where you establish the seedlings. So let's start off with multi-story. Here we go. Multi-story stocking standards, IDF only. As I explained, it's really intended and works. I guess the best way to put it is the most applicable use of multi-story stocking standard and multi-story survey methodology is in the IDF. It was designed for that, specifically designed for that. The total guidance around that is based on primarily Douglas fir regeneration and the other species that we would regenerate in the true interior Douglas fir zone. So it means multiple entries are planned on a shorter cutting cycle, somewhere between 20 to 40 years, usually less than 40 years. Retained stems, planned or not, if they contribute to stocking, must be healthy. So there's a criteria around the damage criteria around the stems that are left have some rigor as far as acceptability. One of the criteria in order to apply it is usually that layer 1 and 2 combined have to be present, usually greater than or equal to 6% crown closure. That's a soft tally. It's a real difficult one to figure out. We've converted that to 5 square meters of basal area. You've got to have at least that in those upper layers. Layer 3 and 4 have to be present and or present. So you've got to have something above and something below. So you've got to have this, at least that vertical structure within the stand that you're going to survey. Uneven age stocking standards apply, so there's a different target and a minimum per layer. Again, another facet of the multi-story that's quite unique. If you want extended and really detailed on the procedure, there's a multi-story workbook that's on the survey's website that you can use and look at the procedures in detail. I'm not a totally versed multi-story surveyor. I've done it. I did it when I was a consultant for a number of years, but I haven't cranked the hectares and years of doing it as some folks in the southern interior, and they're probably much more experts than me. So I would recommend that if you're getting into it in a production mode, to contact those individuals that have a little bit more experience on it. I'm more familiar with the boundaries and the criteria, and that's just an honest admission. So the photos on the right-hand side quite clearly illustrate this. One stand is in both these stands are in Williams Lake, and the one above had multi-story stocking standards. It you can see that it's been harvested a couple of times. There's stumps of different sizes and mixes of structure throughout. We've got regen stems here and some pole and mature stem layers. Typically some of the layer 3s are kind of missing, not so abundant, but definitely lots of structure. This block below actually had multi-story stocking standards as well, and I think it's actually declared free growing. I put an X on this one. I'm not too excited about multi-story stocking standards being used for this type of application. I don't see the distribution of stems and the potential of coming back and removing some of these stems in the overstory is an easy process, but that's my opinion, and that's what I'm trying to illustrate, the suitability of some of these things. So, multi-story parameters. We use the multi-story stocking standards, and as you can see from the illustration here, this is where we basically take the even age stocking standard of 1200 and 700, 1200 as a target and 700 as a minimum, and break it into the layers. And so each layer ends up with a corresponding target stocking standard and a minimum stocking standard. And so you end up with a M value, unique M value for each layer. And as I'll just work through here, as we look at layer 1's our mature layer, upper layer, the minimum stocking standard so that the target is 600, our minimum is 300. And so our M value divided, if we're using a 3.99 meter plot, divided by 200 is 3. And so subsequently it moves down as you move down through the layers. Layer 2, 800 and 400, and our M values 4. Layer 3, 1000, 500, and layer 4, 1200 and 700. Looks the same, right? Here's our even age stocking standards actually when you end up at the end of the day. So the magic part here is the nesting aspect. So all layers with nesting are capped up to the M value. So as you work through your plot, and you start with layer 1, go to layer 2, go to layer 3, go to layer 4, cumulatively as you add up the nesting value goes higher and higher till you meet your sort of target for the block and your minimum for the block. So these are kind of added up. If that doesn't make any sense right now, hang in there, stay with me, have another drink of coffee, and we're going to explain it with the virtual plot. Hopefully we'll go there. We're going through the more detailed stuff right off the bat. Well, maybe not. Cedrus's single entry dispersed retention is pretty detailed too, but if I'm really losing anybody on the watching right now, it's because you're probably not an experienced surveyor, and I've probably lost you already, but hang in there, whatever, same price. Okay, so no minimum intertree for layer 1. So all layer 1s that are within your plot count, regardless of what the tally is. How many? If they're all grouped in one little corner, or if there's one over one side and there's 2 together, then you count 3. So there's no minimum intertree for that, because these are basically layer 1s, and they're a multi-story. Then they're going to contribute to the next cutting cycle, 10, 15, 20 years. So they're going to be gone. So you don't really need that room right off the bat. There's multi-story damage criteria specifically for multi-story survey methodology, and it's designed to have the separation between the layers, and it addresses specifically that you're going to be logging that first layer 1s right off the bat. No statistics apply. Ooh, fantastic. So I don't have to crank stats. That is a little bit of magic, but it just gets crazy when you try to do statistics on 4 different layers at the same time. So it gets a little sticky. You can do your tallies by hand, but there are programs out there that'll do it for you. That's for sure. And the software is set up so that you can tally it electronically as well. And you use the stocking standard decision key. And that is the magic of multi-story, and sometimes the tragic aspect of it. And in tragic in the context that it's been misused because of that magic aspect of the stocking status decision key. And so really has elevated the awareness of the limitations to the multi-story parameter and where it's most suited and where it is not. So we're going to the virtual plot right off the bat. Here we go. We'll just dive right in here. As you'll notice, this is the 3.99 meter radius plot. I've snuck in the M value for each layer just from the previous slide up on the upper left-hand side, and you can see that I've got this capping value that we need for nesting. Ooh, nesting, yes, we're going to be building nests. No, we're not going to be building any nests. We're just incorporating, adding up cumulatively, capping as we go down through the plot. Here's the boundary of my 3.99. Looks like we're in the IDF. We've got a nice stand of Douglas fir here. So let's go. Here's our layer 1s in the plot. they all contribute. There's no minimum intertree. We start from the layer 1 down. Critical point to remember. And we look at those individuals, if they're healthy or not. And we're going to count them all as well-spaced trees. They're looking pretty good. And we'll call them all free-growing because they meet the damage criteria. Technically, the damage criteria only applies to free-growing, just as a refresher for folks. And as you can see on this virtual card on the bottom, we've tallied all 3 in here, and we tally 3 over here. And we're allowed, our M value is 3. So, you know, technically I should write an M in here, but we'll just write 3 in so we don't lose everybody. And so we just ended up with a cap there. If I had 4 really healthy, well-spaced trees in this plot, I would record 4 here, and I would cap this. I'd put an N value in here so our 3 would show up. Okay, let's look at the next layer. We'll go down to our pole layer. So there's 2 layer 2s in our plot, and so we would tally them down here. We've got total conifers of 2 preferred Douglas fir, and I can only take 1 because I'm capped. Between layer 1 and layer 2, I can only have 4. So this is how this nesting comes, is that the M value is nested within the plots cumulatively as you work down. So I can only record 1 in this space. I got 2 over here, which is fine. This is our uncapped, well-spaced zone in here. You could you could tally the well-spaced and free-growing without capping as well within this zone. But I've only got so much space on this virtual plot. So, so I only can record 1 because I'm capped at 4. There we go. Now we'll go to 3 more. Oh, sorry, we'll go to layer 3 and our sapling layer. And again, these guys have a minimum intertree distance between them. We have to be a certain distance away. Same with the layer 2s from the layer 1s. There would be a minimum intertree distance. So we have 2 layer 3s, but you know what? I'm capped at 5 total trees as I'm nesting down here. So I can only count this 1 over here. And so again, I can only record 1 over here in the capped column, if you want to call it. This is the uncapped area, and this would be the capped area. So let's look at our last layer. Here's a layer 4 tree on the outside. It's well spaced. It's far enough away from this one. And I can actually tally it because I've got up to 6. And I've only got 5 here so far when I'm capped. So that adds up to 6. So in reality, this is totally an M plot. We're fully stocked. Even though we've got a little bit of a gap in here, we're right up to our M value in this multi-story plot. Way to go. Okay, so here's another way of looking at it from a plot basis, and this is right out of the multi-story card, and gives you an idea, or sorry, the multi-story manual that you can get from the survey's website. And it just shows the exact same plot I just went through, but just looking down at it rather than virtually sideways, and gives you an idea how you would tally these items. You can see they've located the M values for your nesting values in here. We've actually located, might be taking some basal area numbers, and I guess a prescription required a modal diameter. There was a management requirement or prescription requirement in that regard. Okay, and so now we get to the stocking decision key, and I want to kind of work through that and how that would work. So once you finish your plots within the whole block, we have to decide if we've met our stocking standard or not. I think one of the main objectives of a silviculture survey is to tally that information. So again, we use this almost nested approach where we start from the top and work down and work through the stocking standards in that regard. So the first question is layer 1, if you're doing well-spaced or free-growing, whatever obligation you're doing, what are the numbers per hectare? Did you meet the minimum stocking standard for layer 1? If you did, then the block is SR right off the bat. If you didn't, we go down and start tallying, nesting our minimums for the opening. So if we didn't meet it, say we had 200, we would have to go to the next level down and add up the layer 2s into it. So with layer 2s, if we add them all together, are we equal to or greater than 400 per hectare? If the answer is yes, then we're SR, or free growing. If we're not, we add in the layer 3s. And again, the same test, but again, the minimum starts coming up. And so collectively across all 3 layers, do we meet the minimum 500? If we do, then it's SR. You can actually end at that point, depending on your layer tally. And if we didn't, then again, we add the whole enchilada together, all 4 layers together. Have we met 700, which is sort of our regular minimum for even age stocking standards in most stands in the interior. If we did, great, then we've met our obligations. If we didn't, then we're an NSR, not free growing situation. So we've got to come up with a different plan or do something differently, or wait, or fill plant, or offload the obligation to somebody else, I guess, or something like that, or hire a different surveyor. But anyway, so this is the magic and the tragic here in multi-story, is that you can actually meet your obligation with your layer 1. And some folks have some issues with it. Some folks don't. Some folks prefer to use some other criteria of meeting their stocking, maybe a minimum basal area or a minimum stocking in all layers without capping. That's why it's a good idea to tally the uncapped and maybe meet those prescription requirements. And so you got to keep in mind that there's going to be prescription requirement details that may not be fully addressed with what I've just shown you. So there's going to be some tweakings in whatever data you have to collect and in order to meet that specific prescription. Okay. So multi-stories damage criteria, just to touch on that a little bit. Basically, how does it differ from the even age damage criteria? Well, wounds and infections and deformations are a little more complex per layer, and generally a little more lenient for layer 1 and 2, because these are the upper layers, and they probably going to be harvested within the next 20 years. So you'll see in there's a little more leniency there. You're allowed to have more scars, basically, because you could tolerate a certain amount of infection of fungus or some pathogen going in, and because you're going to harvest it pretty quick, you're going to salvage it. So there's more detail on the decay that you may find on those upper layer stems, and of course root rot is calculated by layer and net down. So more rot in the upper layers, the higher the net down, because it will keep on spreading because it's within that upper level. And there's a dwarf mistletoe infection. It's pretty well the same for the lower layers, but we use this Hawksworth rating, which applies to the layer 1, so they're mature layers. And if you're not familiar with the Hawksworth rating, it's a class system of rating mistletoe within the crown, and typically I'll just go through the steps here and how to do it. So you divide the crown in this nasty looking hemlock that I've got in the photo here, and that's actually a mistletoe on a pine, but I didn't have a close-up of hemlock mistletoe, so you get the idea. You divide the crown into thirds, as shown with these arrows, the live crown. So if this is the bottom of the live crown, then you would divide it visually into thirds, sort of with your hand or pointing kind of thing up at the crown. And you rate each third separately. So each third should be given a rating of 0, 1, or 2, as described below. So it's fairly subjective in a way, but at least it's categorizing it. So a 0 rating would be no infections at all, no visible infections, not seeing anything. A 1 rating would be light infection. Trying to quantify it here is less than or equal to half of the total number of branches in that third are infected. And heavy infection is greater than half of the total branches are infected. So you're seeing these lesions, these swellings. If you see fruiting bodies, that's awesome. But if you see these kind of things going on, wow, look at that right on the stem. So you add all the ratings up, and if they're greater than 3, then it's unacceptable. So if you're getting this combo of ratings for all 3 layers, then it's an unacceptable tree. And so that's the concept behind the Hawksworth rating.